Most people walk up to a pineapple like they're buying a paint can. They stare at the color, tug one leaf, maybe squeeze the sides, and hope for the best. Then they get it home, cut into it, and find one of two disappointments waiting inside. Either it's pale, sharp, and stubborn, the kind of fruit that tastes more like a chore than a treat, or it's already going soft in the wrong places, sweet for about 6 bites, and headed downhill fast. And the strange part is, pineapples fool smart people every day because they look simple. Spiky crown on top, rough skin outside, golden flesh inside. What could be so hard about that? Quite a bit, actually. Because a pineapple is one of those ordinary things that only starts helping you once you stop looking at it like a decoration and start reading it like food. And what some folks call the old Amish trick is really something better than a trick. It's a habit of paying attention before you pay the price. That matters more now than it used to. Years ago, people who bought produce carefully did not do it to feel clever. They did it because waste cost something. If a melon was bad, dinner changed. If peaches were picked wrong, the jar shelf stayed empty. If you bought fruit blind, you paid twice, once at the store and once at the cutting board. Somewhere along the way, a lot of people quit learning the fruit and started trusting the sticker, the display, the seasonless pile under bright lights. We got surrounded by more choices and somehow lost some judgment. Pineapple is a perfect example of that. It's sold like a tropical luxury, handled like a party centerpiece, and chosen with some of the worst instincts people bring to produce. The first mistake is thinking ripe means yellow all over. That sounds sensible. It even looks sensible. But pineapples don't ripen the way people wish they did. They don't keep turning sweeter in the same way a peach or banana does once they're cut from the plant. Their sugar is largely set when they're harvested. Color can tell you something, but not enough to trust it by itself. A pineapple can still have plenty of green and be sweet. Another can glow gold from top to bottom, and already be drying out or breaking down inside. So if color is the first thing you trust, color will eventually embarrass you. The second mistake is listening to one flashy little rule and treating it like gospel. You've heard them. Pull a leaf from the center, smell the bottom, knock on it, judge the weight, count the eyes. None of those are useless, but none of them deserve the whole job. The real power is not one cute trick. It's knowing which sign tells you what, and which sign lies when taken alone. That is the hidden value in an ordinary pineapple. Not that it has one magic signal, but that it will tell you the truth in layers if you stop trying to rush the conversation. So let's start with the part people rush past, because it doesn't feel dramatic enough. Wait. Pick up 3 pineapples that are close in size. Not 1, 3. The one that feels heavier for its size is usually the one worth noticing first. Why? Because good fruit still holds moisture and density. A pineapple that feels unexpectedly light can be drying out, fibrous, or simply farther from that juicy sweet spot you were hoping for. This doesn't mean the heaviest pineapple in the whole bin wins automatically. It means weight is one of your first honest clues, because it tells you the fruit is still carrying something worth cutting into. Now here's where people go wrong with that. They grab one fruit, think it feels heavy enough, and stop there. Heavy compared to what? Your memory from last week? The watermelon you picked up 5 minutes ago? Pineapple rewards comparison. Old produce buyers knew that without turning it into a slogan. You don't need a scale, you just need contrast. A thing becomes easier to read when you put it beside another of its own kind. That is true in the garden, in the pantry, and in the produce aisle. The pineapple has hidden power, but only if you slow down enough to let one fruit teach you another. Then smell the base, not like you're trying to impress anybody, but like you're checking whether the fruit is alive in the way ripe fruit ought to be alive. Turn it over and smell the bottom end where the stem was. A good ripe pineapple often gives off a sweet, full, warm smell there. Not candy, not fermented syrup, just a clear sweetness that says the fruit was picked when it had something to give. If there's almost no smell at all, it may be underripe or simply dull. If the smell is boozy, sour, or overly heavy, you may be too late. A strong smell is not automatically good. A clean smell is better than a loud one. That one detail has saved a lot of bad purchases, because modern buying habits train people to look more than they notice. Pineapple is not furniture. You are not matching it to the kitchen curtains. You are choosing a living food that is already moving toward its end. Smell tells you where it is on that path. And once you start trusting that, you stop getting tricked by surface beauty. Some of the prettiest pineapples are all show. Some of the best ones are a little less polished, a little less uniform, but full of what actually matters when the knife goes in. Now let's talk about the leaf test, because this is the one people turn into a carnival game. Yes, You can tug a leaf from the center of the crown. Yes, if it releases with a little ease, that can be a sign the fruit is ripe. But no, it is not the whole verdict. A leaf can come out more easily because of storage conditions, handling, age, or simple variation. If you use that test alone, you'll sometimes pick a pineapple that is over the hill and congratulate yourself all the way home. The better way is to use the crown as supporting evidence. The leaves should look reasonably fresh, not gray, dry, or collapsing. A gentle tug can confirm what the weight and smell already suggested. It should not overrule them. And that's the old practical wisdom people keep missing. A sound decision rarely comes from one sign. It comes from a small agreement between several signs. When the pineapple feels heavy, smells sweet at the base, has healthy-looking leaves, and shows no major soft trouble spots, now you're not guessing, now you're reading. That's the difference between a trick and a principle. Tricks are brittle, principles travel. Once you understand that, you stop hunting for gimmicks and start building judgment. There is another place the pineapple speaks plainly, and most people either ignore it or misread it. The shell. You don't want a fruit that is hard as carved wood, and you don't want one with broad, mushy patches, leaking juice, or dark sunken spots. What you want is firmness, with just a little give when pressed gently, especially lower on the fruit. Not a squeeze that bruises it. Just enough contact to notice whether the fruit feels sound and alive rather than stiff and tired. Softness in the wrong places means breakdown. Rock hard all over can mean it was picked too early for good eating. The sweet spot sits in between, and it feels more natural than dramatic. Notice the eyes, too, those diamond-shaped sections across the skin. When a pineapple begins to look flatter-eyed and fuller, that can be a good sign of maturity. When the eyes are very sharp, raised, and narrow, the fruit can be less developed. Again, this is not a courtroom sentence. It is one more clue. Pineapple is a stack of clues. That's why careless shoppers get frustrated. They want a single guaranteed shortcut in a fruit that really asks for 5 quiet seconds of honest attention. And here is the part that surprises a lot of people. The so-called secret is often less about the pineapple and more about the person holding it. If you approach produce like it's all random, it will stay random. If you approach it expecting the fruit to leave signs, and you train yourself to notice them in combination, your odds change fast. Not perfectly, nature still gets a vote, supply chains still get a vote, but your odds change enough that you stop feeling dependent on luck. That matters. Not just because pineapple costs money, but because every small act of good judgment strengthens the next one. Think about how often people overbuy gadgets, containers, and kitchen tools because they no longer trust their own senses. They want an app to tell them when to water, a chart to tell them when to harvest, a label to tell them what tastes good, a device to tell them whether fruit is ready. Sometimes labels help, but old practical households leaned hard on trained noticing because it worked across situations. The same person who could tell when beans were ready for canning, or when hay had dried enough to stack, or when bread dough had risen just right, was not using mystical powers. They were using repeated attention. Pineapple looks exotic, but the principle is old and common. Learn the signs, compare them, trust the pattern, and waste less. That's why the phrase Amish trick catches people. It sounds like there must be one hidden move, one simple action passed quietly from hand to hand. But the deeper truth is less theatrical and more useful. The real secret is restraint. Don't let one signal seduce you. Don't let bright color sell you a weak fruit. Don't let one easy leaf convince you you've cracked the code. Hold the pineapple, compare it, smell it. Look at the base, check the shell. Notice the crown, then make the call. That habit works because it respects the object in your hand instead of turning it into a superstition. And once you understand that, something else changes. You stop being so easy to sell to. That may sound bigger than a pineapple deserves, but it really isn't. A person who relearns how to judge simple things becomes harder to manipulate in expensive categories. If you can slow down and read a piece of fruit instead of being dazzled by the display, you can do the same with tools, feed, seed, lumber, appliances, even advice. You start asking, what is this actually telling me? What signs matter? Which signs are just there to flatter my first impression? That is hidden power. Not in the pineapple alone, but in the habit it trains. There's also a practical side after you bring it home, because even a well-chosen pineapple can be mishandled into mediocrity. If you're not cutting it that day, don't trap it in a way that builds too much moisture around it. Let it breathe. Keep it at room temperature if you plan to use it soon, and don't expect it to become much sweeter just by waiting around. If it already smells ready, don't leave it sitting proudly on the counter for 3 more days because it looks nice there. Pineapple is not improved by admiration. It is improved by being used at the right time. When you do cut it, pay attention to what your choice produced. That part matters. If it was sweet but a little more tart near the top, remember that. If the base had the strongest aroma and turned out richest, remember that. If a very yellow shell fooled you and the fruit was already getting woolly, remember that too. This is how judgment actually grows. Not from memorizing cute produce folklore, but from checking your choices against the result. Every good homesteader, good cook, good gardener, good stockman, good builder, and good saver does some version of this. They close the loop. They learn from the thing itself. You can even use a less than perfect pineapple wisely if you understand where it missed. A pineapple that is decent but not great for eating fresh can still be excellent in cooking, preserves, grilled slices, chutney, or mixed into something where a little extra tartness is welcome. That matters because practical living is not only about choosing better, it's also about recovering value. Not every fruit has to be perfect to earn its keep, but you do want to know the difference between a fruit that needs another use and a fruit that was never worth the money in the first place. One of the quiet lessons in all this is that ordinary things stay ordinary only when we don't understand them. A pineapple on a store display can seem like just another item in a pile, one more purchase in a cart full of purchases. But the minute you know how to read it, it stops being generic. It becomes legible. And anything legible becomes more useful. That is true of soil when you learn its smell and crumble. It is true of wood when you learn the sound of dryness in it. It is true of weather when you notice the wind before the front arrives. Knowledge does not always arrive as a big revelation. Sometimes it arrives as a better hand on a familiar object. That is why I think these old selection habits matter beyond fruit. They quietly return dignity to daily life. Not glamorous dignity. Not something you post about because it makes you look impressive. The quieter kind. The kind that comes from not being careless with what you bring into your house. The kind that comes from not needing everything prejudged by a screen or a label or a slogan. The kind that lets you feed people better, spend money wiser, and trust yourself more because you are paying attention to what is right in front of you. And there is one more pineapple mistake worth mentioning, because it trips up people who are trying very hard to do the right thing. They hunt for perfection so aggressively that they pass up good fruit waiting for an impossible one. A pineapple may have a little green and still be excellent. It may have a shell that isn't picture perfect and still cut beautifully. Once you know the signs, don't become fussy in the wrong direction. You are not selecting a museum piece. You are choosing food. Read for eating quality, not display quality. There's freedom in that, especially now when so much of modern shopping tries to train us to value appearance over use. So if you want the so-called secret in plain language, here it is. Don't ask one question of a pineapple. Ask several. Is it heavy for its size? Does the base smell sweet and clean? Do the leaves look alive rather than tired? Does the shell feel firm with a slight natural give instead of hard or mushy? Are there warning signs like leakage, deep soft spots, or fermented smell? When enough of those answers line up, you have something real to trust. Not certainty. Better than certainty, actually. Sound judgment. That old way of buying does something modern convenience often forgets to do. It keeps you involved. It makes you part of the decision instead of just the final payer. And for people trying to live a little more carefully, grow a little more of their own food, waste a little less, and depend a little less on packaging and promises, that matters. Because self-reliance is not built only in the big dramatic categories. It is built in small, repeated choices. The sort of choices most people rush through. The sort of choices that teach you whether you are awake to your own life or just moving through it with a cart. So the next time you see a pile of pineapples, don't just grab the brightest one and hope. Let the fruit speak in more than one way. Compare the weight. Smell the base, read the leaves, feel the shell. Let several quiet truths agree before you spend your money. That is the nearest thing to a real secret there is. Not magic, not folklore for folklore's sake. Just an ordinary object becoming powerful because you finally understood what it was saying. And I'd be curious what sign you trust first when you pick a pineapple, or if your family had a completely different way of judging good fruit. Some people swear by smell, some go by weight before anything else. Some still reach for color and do just fine in their area. I'd honestly like to hear which method has saved you money and which one fooled you. Because half of practical knowledge survives by being used, and the other half survives by being compared out loud. There's another useful thing to understand, especially if you've been burned by pineapples that were sweet in one bite and flat in the next. A pineapple does not always eat the same from top to bottom. Often the lower part near the base tastes richer and sweeter first, while the top can carry a little more tartness. That is not necessarily a bad fruit. That is just part of how the fruit developed. So when you cut one and think, well, that first piece near the shoulder wasn't amazing, don't decide too fast. Move lower. Taste again. Learning that simple difference keeps people from misjudging a decent pineapple, and it also teaches you what your nose was really picking up when you smelled the base in the store. It also helps to know what not to romanticize. Pineapple is not improved by pretending every old method is infallible. Sometimes the fruit was harvested too early, chilled too long, handled too roughly, or stacked in poor conditions before it ever reached your hands. In those cases, even good selection can only do so much. But that should not discourage you. It should sharpen you. Because once you accept that no single sign guarantees perfection, you become better at choosing the best fruit available instead of chasing a fantasy fruit that may not exist in that store on that day. That's a grown way to shop, and I mean that seriously. A lot of disappointment comes from expecting the market to do all the thinking for us. We want abundance, convenience, perfect appearance, peak flavor, and no effort on our part. Then we feel cheated when one of those things drops away. But food has always asked for some participation. Not endless labor, just participation. Pineapple is a fine teacher for that because it meets you halfway. It does not hide everything. It gives clues. You just have to meet those clues with attention. If you buy pineapple often, you'll also notice stores vary. Some places move a lot of fruit fast, which means the pineapples sit for less time and the signs can be truer. Other places have gorgeous displays that turn slowly. There, the fruit may look handsome while quietly aging in place. That is another reason comparison matters. In a slow-moving store, the whole pile can be a little tired. In a busy store, the pile may be mixed, some ready now, some better for tomorrow, some not worth taking. The fruit is one factor. Turnover is another. You don't need to overthink it, but it's worth noticing patterns in where your best purchases usually come from. And let me say something about squeezing, because produce gets ruined by people trying to test it too aggressively. A pineapple is not an avocado. You do not need to press it like you're checking a mattress. Gentle pressure is enough. The goal is not to force an answer out of the fruit. The goal is to notice what answer is already there. Too much handling bruises produce, and the irony is that many people damage fruit in the name of avoiding damage. A light hand is part of good judgment too. When you get a really good pineapple, pay attention to how different it feels from the disappointing ones. The aroma should be inviting without seeming tired. The flesh should be juicy without turning translucent and weak. The sweetness should feel bright, not flat. The core may still be firmer, but it should not seem like chewing rope. That contrast is worth remembering, because memory is part of practical skill. Every well-chosen pineapple improves the next one if you let it. Every bad one can do the same if you are honest about why it missed. Some people refrigerate the whole pineapple as soon as they get home, because cold feels safe. But if it's close to ready and you want flavor, cutting it and chilling the pieces you won't use right away often makes more sense. Cold can dull aroma and texture. The point is not ritual. It's simply to stop using careless habits on fruit that depends on timing. And this is where the humble object really earns the title hidden power. Because once you understand one thing well, it begins to train your character in small, stubborn ways. You become less impulsive, less dazzled by appearances, less willing to let convenience replace discernment. You begin to enjoy the pause before the purchase. You begin to recognize that knowledge does not always save time in the moment, but it often saves money, waste, and disappointment afterward. That is a trade worth making. So no, the old pineapple trick is not magic. It's better than magic because you can repeat it. Pick up more than one. Compare their weight. Smell the base for sweetness, not fermentation. Let the crown support the decision instead of making it. Check for firmness with a little natural give, not mush and not stone. Watch for leaking juice, dark damage, or that tired look produce gets when its best days are gone. Then choose with your eyes, your hands, and your nose all voting together. Once you start reading fruit this way, you begin noticing the same quiet language everywhere else in the kitchen and garden too. A melon, an onion, a tomato, even a loaf of bread cooling on the counter, all have their own way of telling the truth. You just have to stop treating ordinary things like background noise long enough to hear it. That is worth relearning every season.